Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another Eternal Top Decks with one of the latest hot throne decks, the Endra combo deck, made possible by the latest campaign, Promises by Firelight. We got this sweet combo piece and now people are like trying all kinds of versions of this. I actually don't know who originally came up with the deck, but some guy posted a list on Reddit and it went around and I got the list in front of me, but without knowing who it originally is from. So if you know who it is, let me know in the comments, or if the person that built it is watching, let me know in the comments yourself. Props to you for coming up with the deck anyways. Alright, let's take a look at my version and where I am with the archetype right now. Okay, so the list is still like reasonably close to the initial list, but I made some adjustments and tunings since then, and I'm gonna talk about like all the card choices and why I like them the way they are right now. So first of all, the units. The units, not much to say here. 3 Endra with 1 in the market, and for X-Tune Merchant to virtually have 7 copies of Endra, which is very important since you need to find at least one to start winning the game. Also that's why we're playing Merchant, not a Smuggler, and I'll talk about the market later. Then we have the spells. So basically we have cards that are mainly there to combo off for Dark Return, for Haunting Scream, for Mirror Image, and to Clutchmate. They all are meant to give you extra copies of Shavka's song by copying or reanimating Endra. So the I have 4 of each of these and 2 Clutchmate, simply because Clutchmate is a bit expensive and very situational. It basically only is good when you're comboing and doesn't really do much else, given that we only have 7 units and we already have 4 Mirror Image that have the same issue, so to speak. So I don't want to go like too deep in those into those if we can run cards that are a bit more flexible and help us on our way to trying to combo off, which is pretty important usually with fine-tuning and balancing combo decks. If you have too many parts that are just good when you're winning and don't do anything else, you often have trouble getting to the point where you start comboing. Then we have a card draw package of 2 Devour, 4 Quarry, 4 Strategize, 4 Honor of Claws, and 3 Demantes. So Devour, the original list had 4. I'm not sure if 2 is the right number, but I'm pretty sure 4 is not. So the right number is somewhere between like 0 and 3. More likely 2 or 3 than 0. But the thing is, as you all know, we barely have any units. We have Granite Waystone, so sometimes we can get a Granite into Devour. But once again, another card that's basically mostly good once we go off, because then we can use it to draw more cards, get rid of an Endra to get her back with Dark Return or Haunting Scream, which can be very important, since sometimes it can be a bit tricky to get an Endra in the Void. So feel free to just kind of chump block with Endra early on. That also means she can't be transformed or silenced if she's not in play. And then you have the Dark Returns and Haunting Screams more useful for trying to go off. And yeah, Devour also helps against silence and stuff like Equivocate sometimes. So it does a couple of decent things, but it is pretty situational since, yeah, we don't have a lot of units to use it with. And once again, having a lot of cards in your hand that don't do anything unless you are in your combo sequence is problematic. So 4 is definitely not where you want to be. 2 might be 1 too few in the end, because 2 cost draw 2 that also gets your Endra back into the Void for Haunting Scream and Dark Return might be valuable enough, to have more than 2 and have a third copy, but the thing is I like the other cards that I'm running currently more, and also like I said, the card sits in your hand a lot of the time because you just don't have anything to do with it. So currently I like the 2. Quarry is just a no-brainer. It's just really good card selection, and also makes the cards that you get cheaper, which is helpful in your combo turn, or just not falling too far behind. Like turn 2 Quarry, finding an Honor of Claws, lets you turn 3 Honor of Claws, for example, which is really nice. The alternative to Strategize is Call the Deck. I think the original list had 2 and 2. Some people play Call the Deck, some people play Strategize. I think Strategize is better. Sure, Call the Deck digs 50% deeper, it digs 1 card deeper, which is nice for finding like Endra, because it obviously increases the chance. But the thing is, Strategize is virtual card advantage. The deck has a fair share of like situational or useless cards that you can just get rid of Strategize, which is value not to be underestimated. We have Granite, Waystone tokens sometimes to Strategize away if we don't have a merchant to use them with. And then since the deck sees quite a lot of cards, it often sees more power than it needs, so strategizing away power when you, like, for example, draw 2 spells with Strategize but have spare power in your hand that you don't need, you suddenly gained a lot more value than Call the Deck did, which is why I stuck with Strategize. It also makes the deck better at functioning as a Skycrack deck, so if you have a good opening hand that doesn't have Shadow or has a Diplomatic Seal that you can either use on Shadow or Primal, it's much easier here to use on Primal all the time because we don't have a lot of Shadow cards. We have fewer Shadow cards, and the Shadow cards are mostly combo pieces when going off. So by the time you go off, you should have found a Shadow, and being able to more reliably play your card draw also increases your chance of finding Shadow. So having all your card draw in Primal allows you to be better on like just Skycrack. Obviously makes you worse on like Stone Scar, for example, but that is worth it, especially like mainly for the Diplomatic Seal scenario that I just described. Then we have 4 Honor of Claws, just a nice power card draw. Once again, we have a fair share of cards that we might not need, so discarding a card is less bad than it seems. So this often gains you virtually more than 2 extra cards, thanks to discarding a card that you don't have use for anyway. So yeah, 4 power just digs deep, gets you a lot of resources to get ready to combo. It's pretty good. Not much to say here. And then we have Demand Death, which is kind of, especially when the game's got a little more grindy, and you're probably gonna die in like 2 turns, so you kind of have to get a feel for like if you don't die the next turn, but you're like almost certainly not gonna die the next turn, but certainly gonna die the turn after, it's a good time to just demand death and plan to combo the next turn, basically. And yeah, just the raw power of like drawing 4 cards is really good. Honestly, that's one of the cards that I'm not entirely sure about. It has been pretty meaningful, especially when the games got pretty grindy, but I have mixed feelings about it. Maybe it's fine to just have 1 in the market and use those main deck slots for other things like an additional Devour, maybe some Call the Deck, something like that, that is a bit more flexible. And maybe Honor of Claws is enough as like yeah, heavy resource top end card draw, but I'm not sold yet to yeah, let go of Demand Death, since I had a fair share of situations where I just was lacking quite a bunch of resources, and then just raw power drawing 4 to make sure you can combo the next turn is pretty powerful. And yeah, with Honor of Claws and Strategize and Merchants, we can get rid of them when they're too clunky and kind of sit in our hand useless. And yeah, then we have some utility for Torch, for Shakedown, and to reread. Reread also doubles as combo piece. First of all, it lets you get back all the enablers that we mentioned, but it also lets you get back a Shavka song. It's not as good as getting an enabler, because an enabler is ramping up your power count for the Shavka songs and gets you an extra power, while reread is just kind of like for the end of the loop, recycling the last Shavka song, which is not as good, which is why I went down to 2 again. I initially had like 3 or 4, because it's also nice to get back Shakedowns and Torches, and just quite flexible, like when you light on card draw and you need more cards, instead of having this combo piece in your hand that doesn't do anything, you could use this get back card draw. The flexibility is really nice, but it's actually like quite awkward in the combo, since the cheap cards to get back are Dark Return and Haunting Scream, but they only have limited usage usually during the combo, because yeah, you need an Endra in the Void for that. And since we don't want to run too many Devours, since they are so situational, we also don't want to like overtax our Screams and Dark Returns. But yeah, having additional Torches and Shakedowns is pretty good here, and still being useful when you're comboing. Just kind of a nice flex slot. And yeah, Torches just helps you win, because the 3 damage to face matters, since you basically win by burning out the opponent, so they're never bad. They just don't produce power and deal less damage than your larger songs during the combo, but they still can meaningfully contribute to winning the game. And they're obviously removal, especially removal for one of the most important cards, which is Teacher of Humility, which is a nightmare for this deck. And that's part of why I added Shakedown. I've seen a couple of other people do this by now too. That was kind of like the first big change that I made to the deck, adding for Shakedown, since they just do so much for the deck. Like I said, Teacher is a big issue. They're great in the mirror at disrupting the opponent, giving you information what your opponents have in hand and what they can do and how likely you are to die. It kind of cycles and deals the damage to the opponent, so it also advances the like burn them out plan a bit, and it still lets you like get deeper into your deck and lets you get closer to your combo pieces. It just does all the things, and it's cheap, so you can reuse it with reread really well, especially in the mirror or against like controlling decks. It's also important that it hits smugglers, merchants, and a lot of the disruption cards that they get, stuff like Gavel, Shush, transformation stuff, counter magic, Royal Decree, lots of things that can be annoying and problematic that Shakedown hits. Just a really, really good card. Yeah, and then we have 25 power plus 2 Seek power. The 2 Seek power are both necessary for the colors to like have enough of our secondary colors in Primal and Shadow, as well as just kind of having enough power. 25 power can be a bit iffy. Like, it's sort of fine because we have Quarry and Strategize, but between the deck being reasonably power hungry in the early turns and really not being able to afford to miss power drops and needing enough color symbols, I really like the 2 Seek power, just like in the original list. But I adjusted the power base a bit. The fire count was a bit high, technically, for like how wonky the other 2 colors are, and the second fire is not actually that important early on. Like, you just need it in the mid game and your card draw can get you there. And we still have like 6, 10, 14, 18, 20 fire virtually. And thanks to the change that I made, like I cut a fire sigil for Seed of Cunning, we now have 5, 9, 10, 14, 16 Primal and Shadow, which is pretty good given that we need both of those to properly operate. Like, we want to Shakedown early for mentioned reasons. We want to be able to torch early. We want to be able to Quarry early, and so on. So yeah, I quite like the power base. The 4 Waystones do a good job of fueling Honor, Strategize, and Merchant, or just providing a jump blocker or Devour target. And then we have the market, which also actually helps with the influence. We have a Skycrack banner, so that's additional Primal, which is good because the deck needs Primal a bit more than Shadow, like I mentioned. Maybe there is a possibility to just kind of give up on Seek Powers for like 2 other cards, and then, I don't know, we might have to restructure the power base slightly, because I would at least want like 15 Primal and 15 Shadow, and unfortunately X2 and Merchant can't get Feln banner. Otherwise that would be great, because that means every time we have fire with the Merchant we can get Primal or Shadow, but in order to do that we would need to run 2 banners in the market, and that's not an option. Yeah, then we have the Endra, obviously. We have a Caleb's Choice, which deals with some annoying relics, stuff like Gavel, for example. Also is a decent counter, for example, in the Mirror and against various other annoying cards. It's just a really good tool to have access to. Garden of Omens is just basically removal for big problematic unit. It's also additional attachment removal. It's a tutor for combo pieces. It's just also a great card to get when you want to go into a bit more of a grindy mode, and obviously the cost reduction is really good for the deck and for comboing off. And then we have the Force Demand Death, when we just need a lot of resources to go off. We can just get it, demand Death, and then combo the next turn. So yeah, that's the list. Has been doing pretty well lately for me. I do think, however, that the deck is not a problem at all. I think the deck is actually quite overrated. I'm not even sure if it's a tier 1 deck. I think it's a good tier 2 deck, but probably not a tier 1 deck. The deck has a really hard time beating anything that basically plays 2-drops or like curves out. Since you have very limited disruption, you have barely any units to defend yourself, so you basically have to kill them before they kill you, and the deck is not good at reliably killing beatdown decks before they kill you, like stuff like Combo Aggro, Elysian Tempo, that sort of stuff. It's really problematic, also because they have Teacher, and even more aggressive decks like Stone Sky Aggro become sort of worse most of the time, unless you have a really good Endra draw where you can kind of shoot down a lot of the small guys, which actually kind of works better than against the time decks that have more robust bodies, where probably only the 3rd Shavka song usually kills something. So yeah, but the deck is really, really good and at beating and punishing slow reactive decks. So its primary strength is punishing all these dirtily good stuff decks, all the 3-faction mid-range decks that just kind of like try to out-greed, out mid-range and out late game each other by going over the top, the Icaria decks and stuff. They really don't have a lot of fun against this, or like the Argenport Revenge decks. Basically anything that doesn't play a curve of units and is more spell-based with a bunch of units usually struggles a lot against this and is really good prey for this. So yeah, that makes it kind of like really good against half the metagame and almost dead against the other half of the metagame, because in my experience so far, the proactive half of the metagame has been really, really bad, and I have had a hard time winning any games against those, while at the same time having a hard time losing games against the reactive half of the metagame. And that's kind of nice, because that's keeping the metagame honest, keeping things away from, pulling things away from the 3-faction good stuff, mid-range, going over the top of each other, pile stuff that has been going on in Throne for a long time, and that's actually according to a statement by Patrick Chapin that he made on Discord. Part of what their plan was with Endra to kind of shake things up, redefine what works and what doesn't work, and what is good and what is not good and playable in Throne by making these slow reactive decks a lot less viable, because unless they find good ways of beating this, they might just lose too much to these decks to become to remain a top tier or like best deck option. Like Winchest, in my opinion, before this deck popped up, was easily the best deck in Throne. Now I'm not so sure, and it at least will need to adapt quite a lot to be able to not just flat out lose to this deck. Anyway, as usual, we're gonna hop into some games and show the deck in action to see how it plays out and show you how to pilot it. So see you in a moment with game number 1. Stay tuned.